Is the ability to handle change well, to grab opportunities when they present themselves to you, something that's like an inherited personality trait? Or is it more like a muscle, something that you can build with experience and time? Well, my guest today, Jo Hanlon, has her fair share of handling change. She's moved through careers and industries and has now landed in a place that feels really aligned with her sense of purpose in this very next chapter of her life. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did having it. Building a business and life that blends contribution, fulfillment, and financial reward? Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the show for women in their 40s and beyond who are on this adventure. I'm Angela Rasmus, and I'm delighted you're here. Well, we're in for a bit of a treat today because we're going to have a wholehearted conversation with a woman who is a very good friend as well as a colleague, but someone who has a meandering experience and relationship with purpose. And that's something that really needs to be unpacked in our conversations, that the road to purpose, inverted commas, is not always direct. Sometimes it's very much a case of trying things, of following your heart, of tuning into the body barometer and getting feedback. Am I on the right path or do I need to make a change? And the gorgeous Jo Hanlon has such a vibrant past, so many adventures this wonderful woman has had that have woven into the life and into the woman that she is today. So that's the sort of conversation that we're going to be having. So Jo, thank you so much for deciding to jump on board and have a wholehearted conversation with me.
Thanks for asking me, Ange. I'm delighted to be here and to be having this conversation with you, and I'm excited to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing with these, aren't they? They're conversations that do weave, and we never know where we're going to end up, but we're always looking for those points of inspiration and, I guess, anchoring so that other women who listen in to these conversations can find perhaps that spark of inspiration that may help them move forward into their next chapter as well. But I love to find out what happened before now. So I've already hinted in that wee intro that there's some interesting twists and turns in the Jo Hanlon path to 2020. So, and as a fellow Kiwi, I know where it all began, but after you came over from the UK. But give us some background, Jo. What brought you to where you are today? Give us the potted history.
My goodness, I'll have to make it quick because we could be here till midnight. So, from a personal family point of view, I did ask my father if his mum had jumped the fence and had a relationship with a gypsy, a Romanian gypsy at some point, because we've moved so many places in our lives, from the UK to New Zealand, from New Zealand to Fiji, from Fiji to Tasmania to the Northern Territory to Brisbane to back to Auckland. And then when I left school, during that time I lived in 42 houses by the age of 42, 9 schools on top of that. So I guess one of the things that's relevant to that is that change and of direction, of location, of people around me, cultures, conversations. That changing environment has always been part of my life, and at no stage has it ever concerned me or worried me. I guess that then followed into my working life. I started off as a registered nurse, which I did both in New Zealand and overseas, as all good Kiwis do, for 2 or 3 years. You'll remember those journeys, Ange.
A long time ago now, but yeah.
And when I came back to New Zealand after about 2.5, 3 years overseas, I wasn't all intending to go back due to romance, but due to practicality and other things happening in my life, I actually ended up staying back in New Zealand. And after nursing for some time, I found myself burning out significantly. There was no support for people in those days, and you really had to manage your own mindset. We didn't have the awareness, the skills, the conversations that we have nowadays that help each other. And so I found myself in a situation where I was burning out. I chose to move out of nursing, but then moved into another, what some other people would probably consider even a more of a demanding work style or work career, which was sales. And I moved into sales with a pharmaceutical wholesaling company for a couple of years, and then moved to Baxter Healthcare, which is a major multinational healthcare company. My nursing background, of course, was very helpful there. During that, I was with them for 18 years, excuse me, and during that time, I guess I did a bit of a spiral up. So I started off as a sales specialist, I moved into product management, I moved back into sales and key account management. Then I moved into business development, strategic planning, and had the fortune of doing a lot of travel overseas again. Then I came back, and due to the changes in the company, moved into business unit management. And then around 1988, after I think I said in my story, standing in the middle of the markets in Istanbul, looking around and thinking, oh, not another damn market, which is quite embarrassing to look back on, really, when I think about it, considering how some people would probably give their left arm to do that. And anyway, I left Baxter and started my own HR coaching company with a colleague of mine. Some people said, why HR? You've never done HR. And they were quite right, except we always had an HR partner as a business unit manager, and during sort of some of those management roles, I'd always worked with an HR partner. So a lot of HR people, I guess, have got the theory and the background in the HR, but they've never actually done the implementation of the programs and the things that are presented by HR to their other business partners. So my business partner Angela and I, another Ange, her and I had a great time for a couple of years learning from each other. She chose to go back to being an employee based on family reasons, and I rebranded my business from Edwards and Hanlon, which was our original name, to Mind Your Peas, and that's what I've been doing ever since. But I've certainly iterated again in the last 9 years in this journey as well. So it's a long and involved story.
Well, actually, it's hearing the twists and turns in it. And when you say it's long and involved, I mean, there was big chunks of time where you were at a particular organisation, but there was obviously lots of different opportunities there and you responded to those. But what I heard was how you've embraced change. It's almost as though you've got this very good relationship with the concept of change. And I'm curious, I guess your circumstance, especially that 42 houses or homes in 42 years and all that gypsy type living when you were younger, was that easier because you're a person who handles change well, or did you handle change well because it was necessary? How do you see it? Is it a character trait, or is it like a muscle that we use and develop?
That's a great question. If I look at my sister, for example, she's 2.5 years older than me. She hated it. She absolutely hated it. She found it so hard. Every time we moved, she found it incredibly difficult to make new friends, to fit into the new environments we were in, and she found it really disruptive. Whereas I just thrived. I just took it in my stride. I jumped on board and I was like, yay, another adventure, and off we go. And I really never consciously had difficulty either fitting in or even leaving behind people. And it wasn't really, though, the interesting thing about it. So I guess it's probably both, Ange. For me, it was a bit of a trait, but also the practice, as in the muscle. I used it so often, it certainly was very strong. What was I going to say? Anyway, it doesn't matter. So I actually enjoyed change, and given the fact that since I've been living my own life as an adult after leaving home and school and stuff, I still have continued that practice. It's obviously something that has never worried me. And in actual fact, sometimes it's like, I've been somewhere for a while, for a couple of years, 2-3 years. It's time to go and move again. One of the things I remembered what I was going to say, and that is I found it, I really had to learn how to be a friend. So when I came back to in New Zealand after when we moved back from Australia back to New Zealand, and I settled down into a place for longer than 2 or 3 years. And I had grown up a bit, I guess. I suddenly started appreciating friends and the people around me and who supported me. But I also realised that to have a good quality friendship and interaction with people, it was really important to have a two-way street, and support, care, love, encouragement, and all of those things came into play in a conscious way. So that was a really big lesson that I learnt, and probably, I guess I'd never had any difficulty learning to meet new people and socialise with new people. But that value of a friend, being a friend and being supported and supportive was really critical.
Oh, I think that goes without saying. If we've got people around us that can, I call them belief buddies, people who can be with you when you're experiencing change in particular, and there is that equal support network, a small but really valuable support network between the two of you, I think it makes it much easier to go through change as well. But I'm curious because the background that you had, and obviously had lots of different experiences through the different companies and moved through those roles, but then to do this extreme about face, so to speak, and start your own business, whether it be in HR, and as you explained to us, there was a logical connection because you'd been responsible for implementation of HR practices. But there's a big difference between being in an employment role and implementing HR and going, you know what, I want the ultimate change now. I'm getting out of here and starting my own business. Talk to us about the thought process behind that, and what were you feeling when the opportunity arrived?
I felt excitement. I felt opportunity was knocking. What happened was a colleague of mine from Baxter came and rang me one day, and she said to me, she was an HR, Angela, as I said, she rang me and said, Jo, I've just seen this business opportunity and I really want to look at it because I think it's time I left, and I'd really like you to consider coming with me and doing this business. And I went, wow, well, that's out of the blue. I mean, I had talked on and off about doing consulting on and off during the years, so I guess it wasn't a total surprise. But for her to ring me and say, I've got this opportunity, it was with an organisation called HR Coach, which was based in Brisbane, and it was a license model. It came under franchise law, but it was a license model where we could buy into the business, and essentially it was probably a turnkey operation for a service business. So we didn't have a physical bricks and mortar location, but we certainly had a toolkit and some training that we attended. So both of us independently met with the woman who owned the business. Both of us independently decided that we loved the idea, loved the people, and that we could absolutely work together because we were so complementary in our styles. So, we just went, yep, let's go for it. And also, I guess I'd been with Baxter for a total of 18 years, so I had a bit of money up my sleeve, and therefore I could afford to fund myself, and she could afford to fund herself for a bit while we essentially set the business up and started it. And we essentially started in 1988, which was pretty much right after, in the middle of the GFC. But we didn't really even think about that. We just thought, no, we'll just get stuck in and do it and make it work.
And that sort of positive attitude, that can-do attitude, that really indicates there was a decent level of self-belief that was sitting there. And so often the thing that I've seen with lots of women that I speak with, the thing that holds us back, sometimes from pursuing that dream, from feeling that desire, but then actually stepping forward, is the doubt piece. Was there any of that going on in your mind? I know you were saying that you had your license model. There was a bit of a turnkey operation there, so there was in some ways a little more surety that was available to you, but there was probably still some thoughts happening in terms of how possible is this?
Not at all, actually.
Wow, okay, then you need to unpack this one for us.
So no, I think because I was doing it with the other Ange, and I really believed in her, and I knew her competencies and capabilities because we had worked together directly and indirectly for a number of years. I loved the business model that we were buying into, and I had absolute faith in that. I could see the quality, the timing of the market was perfect. I think it was the first HR coaching group that had started. There was obviously the odd consultant, but there certainly wasn't a large number in the market. And there was a definite need, because there's always been a need for small and medium businesses to have that type of support. And in those days, I guess it was still relatively simple. A lot of it was to do with compliance. But yeah, there was really I cannot even think of any time where I went, oh my God, what have I done? Such was my either ignorance is bliss or confidence was paramount. I'm not sure. It's probably a mixture.
I think that's actually a great description, that sometimes there does need to be a mix of the two for us to take the leap. Because when this leap took place, I think from the story that you shared on the Next Chapter Stories page, is that you were 48 when you made the jump. And so what I've been observing is that around this sort of age, this is the real next chapter moves that tend to happen. They usually really start hitting us in our mid-40s, where it's like this desire. I mean, you've certainly had that feeling of change and embracing change and taking the next step again and again throughout your career. But it often hits us in those middle years of, what am I actually doing? Am I on purpose? Is what I'm doing making a contribution? How might I have some more impact? There's all these sort of thoughts that are often roaming around in budding entrepreneurs' minds, if not entrepreneurs who then want to go in a different direction. Were any of those sort of considerations a part of your decision to leap?
Absolutely. So all my life, even one of the other reasons I left nursing was I was a little tired of dealing with sick people all the time, and that probably is where my first awareness was about mindset. There was obviously a lot of people who turned up time and time again, and I got somewhat frustrated with the fact that they weren't taking care of themselves. And this is not a blame thing. It's just, this was my youth. I was still young. But I did, I guess, see there was a certain level of helplessness with some people. And then there's some situations where they certainly could have made different decisions. So I was a little frustrated with that. When I worked for Baxter Healthcare for 18 years, it was a fantastic company. It was just the blue chip, multinational. The people were fantastic. The opportunities and conditions that I had during my employment were, next to best. They were just fantastic. And I was able to be very autonomous. I could put my hand up and say, I want to go do that job. And I always used to say, I want to go do that job, and here's somebody else that I think could do my job, and I'd already talked to them, so it was sort of made the leap easy. But at the same time, again, I was working in a company that, and some of the business area that I was looking after, that had a lot of the traditional medical model drugs. Not that we were selling drugs, we were actually selling drug delivery systems. But I have had always a very strong belief in natural health and complementary medicine and the power that we have in making our own decisions and choosing health for ourselves and how we can help ourselves. And I guess I sort of thought, you know what, I don't know if I really want to belong to a company for much longer, even though they've been good to me. My purpose is really helping people develop their own strength and find a way to help themselves, rather than, I guess, almost enabling some people to stay stuck in that medical model. And so, yes, there certainly was a bit of purpose around my decision,
and that's really
around my values.
It's really interesting to hear you talking about when your interest in mindset began, and I think this is very tied to your ability to cope with change in such a easeful way. So talk to us about this mindset piece, because that feeling of frustration, which I think is natural if you are in a scenario where you've raised the awareness and become cognizant of what it is that we have control and influence over, and our own thoughts are definitely one of those. So what were you learning? What were some of the pieces when you started to look at the concept of mindset that made it easier for you to take control of your own life in this way and step into such a big change, inverted commas, and go in a new direction?
Wow, by asking me this question, you just threw me right back into when I was just leaving nursing, and I had just married my first husband. I was 30, and we were living in New Zealand, and we got involved in a multi-level marketing company called New Image. And it was very much about health and nutrition products. So that really aligned with my interests and fascination even back then in nutrition and the value and the importance of nutrition in supporting our health. So that was back in the early 90s. And along the way, it was a little bit like Amway, I guess, in the fact that we had an enormous amount of training that we had to turn up to. So we were turning up to training and being exposed to these mindset, positive thinking thought leaders from America. I can't really remember a lot of the names now, but they're people that have, like Zig Ziglar, for example, and people like that. They've been around for 30 odd years, and we were exposed on a very regular basis to these people. So even back then, I was being trained in the ability to consciously choose my mindset and influence my mindset. And we even had this saying about be careful of people who snipe you, and that is being subjected to the negative influence of other people. So, we'd be talking about our dreams and where we wanted to go, and other people would go, oh, that's stupid, you can't do that. That's, what do you think you are? Who do you think you are? And we were taught to just go, that's your opinion, you're very welcome to it, but my opinion is that I can do it and I'm just going to get stuck in and do it. So it really was way back then that I was very consciously, or I became very conscious about positive thinking, about recognising that every no, in a business sense, when you ask somebody for a sale or you ask somebody to do something and they say no, it's not, you don't take it personally. It's just a no, not right now, or no, we're not interested, or it's a no, but, and it's an opportunity to give people more information so that they could actually make a different decision potentially. So, that's I hadn't actually thought about that for a very long time, but that was a very, very solid 2 or 3 year base for me in learning to influence myself and potentially influence others and their mindset.
I think those seeds were planted in very fertile soil, it's safe to say. You were ready to hear those lessons. And I think we're incredibly fortunate if we can be exposed to that type of positive thinking. Yes, that's one description of it, but that type of possibility of a different way of looking at things. I love that, the SNIOP. Don't be SNIOP. Let me just check. What was it?
Subjected to the negative influence of other people.
Okay, got it. We've got to be aware if we're being SNIOPed.
Okay, I'm going to bring that. We're going to bring that phrase back to life, right? Because I haven't heard it for many years.
I think it's time. And that actually can happen a lot with, and again, I've heard so many stories of this, is when someone is looking to almost shed their skin and move into the next version of them, which to me is a next chapter. That's what my entire philosophy is about. If you're around people who are used to you being a certain character, playing a certain role, being a certain way, if you've been this increasing urge to shake off that skin and step into something new, the people closest to you are not always the ones that are going to support that transformation and that expansion. And I don't think they mean to SNIOP us. I don't think
you're so true, Ange, because somebody told me, probably this is my sister-in-law told me 4 years ago or so, she said to me, your dad, which is my stepdad, your dad said, I don't know what she's doing. I'm not sure that she's going to be very good at this. He didn't say it to me, though, I noticed. He didn't dare say it to me, which I thought was really interesting. He said it to her, and she told me. And I went, oh, well, yeah, that's it. He's entitled to his own opinion. But I think the difference was that he'd been a management consultant back in those, 15, 20 years ago. And he was probably making that call based on his history as general manager and CEO and all sorts of things of all sorts of different companies. And he probably thought, oh, there's no way that Jo can do that because she's never been in those types of situations, without actually realising the detail of what I actually had done in my life and how else you can turn up as an advisor, guide, mentor, coach, or whatever to other people. So I think one of the things about being sniped or having people, we all use our own experiences to judge or to make a decision. Well, it's easy to make a decision based on our past experiences rather than keeping an open mind about what alternative ways there are to do things.
Yeah, we absolutely do. And I guess we'll circle back around to that concept of making sure that you have people around you when you're starting in this new chapter, in this next chapter, who are doing similar things. Maybe not the same as you, but they understand that there is risk and there is excitement and there is challenge and there is failure and there is all of those things mixed in it together. But I think this is the reason why being really connected to your why, your sense of purpose behind it. And as you said, your purpose is to help people develop their own strengths. And moving on from there. And so we can see that you weren't able to do that to an extent when you were back in the nursing roles. And so there was some frustration. You needed to keep moving and see how else you could contribute. Then when this HR opportunity came up, bang, we're in their boots and all. Then, as you said, it got rejigged again and you moved into your own mind your P's. And then again, things have been morphing and evolving and changing. I've known you for a long time now, and understanding that your overall passion and focus now is working with business leaders and teams and individuals who really want to build a new paradigm. And we talked about that being in alignment with the things that are important in life to them. So this feels as though you're wanting to align yourself with people purposefully who are also aligned and open to that idea of becoming the best version of themselves. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. And, that basic purpose still hasn't changed about wanting people to take control of their own lives and make better decisions and to be empowered. That has absolutely been an underlying theme. But it's also, as you know, Ange, when I was on the mastermind with you last year, one of the things that really hit me right in the heart, I suppose, was it's about working with people who want to make those changes themselves, because, as we all know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And people have got to want to be responsible and do those things themselves, because nobody else can do it for you. And we can all only be in control or manage ourselves. We can influence others, but we're the ones that actually have to take the step ourselves and make our own decisions. And that's where we get our true power from, and we can really link in with what it is we're meant to do. Because if you're living somebody else's dream, it's pretty rare that you're actually going to feel authentic about that. So it's really about finding your own dream and getting aligned to that, and off you go.
I think that's where the body barometer comes in, where you can check in with yourself. How are you feeling about the thing that you were doing? And if you start to feel a little off course, then course correcting yourself is just by tuning inwards and finding out what's feeling good and what's feeling right and what gives some joy and gives some flow. But I think that idea is a really important one for our listeners to understand. And the way that I like to explain it is that we're not here to convince or convert people. No matter what type of business that you're building, that you have, that you're stepping into, there are people out there who are ready and waiting for what you have in the flavor that you deliver it in. But there's also a whole lot of people who aren't. And that's okay. If we try and convince and convert them, then we're losing the opportunity for that connection and that service and that contribution to the ones who are aligned with us. So I love the fact that you've recognized that I want to be working with people who are motivated, who are looking to change. I'm not going to drag someone kicking and screaming down the street. That's not my scene. And that would be very unfulfilling when it comes to business overall. So how do you identify those type of people? How do you know that you are communicating with or marketing to, attracting that type of person?
So referrals are the way I probably get my market. So, but it is important. I do tweak do most of my marketing on LinkedIn. My website is ancient. It's still got my basics on it. I'm in the process of rebranding it. So please don't make any judgments about me on my website. But LinkedIn is probably my main place where I have my message, my main message that comes across. So how do I link? A lot of it's about intuition for me, Ange. I'll go and meet with people, and I guess I've met with so many people over the years, and I'm just not attached to the outcome. I basically always like to make sure I meet with people. They say, oh, how do you like to engage with us or with me or whatever? And I say, I always, if possible, want the first meeting to be face-to-face, if possible, because I want to make sure that you like me, I like you, and that we can value each other and work together well. And, I've never had anyone go, well, that's stupid, because everybody has really got that and they've really respected that. And then it's up to how they treat me, because it's not just how I treat them, it's also about how they treat me. A number of times I've turned up in people's offices to meet them. They've kept me waiting for half an hour, or whatever, and there's no real urgency. And I think it's going to be very hard for me, excuse me, unless there's some genuine emergency or some genuine reason, because maybe I'm being a bit hard, but I've always found that if I get a gut feeling about is this person the right fit with me or not, generally I will. I have, excuse me, I started work with some clients, and I very quickly realised that all they want to do is tick and flick from a compliance point of view, and I might do a quick project with them, but I won't go back. And it's so much is about it's the messaging. Language has always, again, been something that's really important to me, so very intentional, and sometimes I can over-agonise on the words that I'm using, but I do know that words are important, and what I want to convey is really important. But the other important side of that is also to recognise whether those people have got the same understanding of those words that I have too. So, again, there's a bit of checking. Conversations are really important. And then if those people don't fit with me, that's fine, absolutely. I'm not going to fit with everybody, and therefore it's about having a network of trusted people that I can go, hey, I'm not the right person for you, but here's somebody else who might work for you or work with you better or fit your needs more closely, whatever that is. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question because it was a bit convoluted.
It does, Jo, because what we're also hearing here is that, and it's not surprising to, if you're listening now, that one of Jo's values is abundance. And this is an example of where you are building a business that has its foundations not only in your sense of purpose and contribution, but also very deeply bedded in your values. You can't have that attitude of, well, if it's not a good fit, then there's someone in my network who you could be a good fit for, if you don't have the value of abundance. There'd be more of a scarcity mindset. So it's reflecting really nicely there. And so, and integrity is another one that you've got listed as a value. And so that concept of how they treat me is just as important as to how I treat and welcome them. That ties back to integrity. So I think this is an incredibly important message for us to get clear on what's important to us. If you want to build a business that's sustainable, and that's what we want in our next chapters, well, there's no fly-by-night stuff. This is something we want to have evolve with us. If it's not wrapped around your values, it's very difficult to sustain it. That's been my experience.
Oh, absolutely. And, I spend quite a considerable amount of time with my clients talking about their values. And often, a lot of people say to me, so why would somebody get you into my business? And if we're looking at the basic HR work, for a start, I'll go in, I'll do some compliance work, look at contracts, look at policies, procedures, look at performance. And it's another one I've spent quite a few meetings over the last couple of weeks assisting clients with performance issues. One of the first things I do when I go in there is I say to them, what are your performance issues? And they tell me, and then we start getting into the conversation about, okay, well, tell me a bit about your purpose statement or your vision and mission, whatever they call it. Tell me about your company values. Tell me about your culture. And they sort of sit there going, why do you want to know all that stuff? The reason I want to know that stuff is if I'm looking to deal with performance issues or to assist companies, businesses, teams, managers, whatever, with their people issues or their performance issues, it's critical to understand the culture of the organisation and how clear those business owners are in articulating their culture, their values, their expectations to their staff. And without that, it's very, very hard to have a clear picture for anybody, whether it's your customers or your clients, let alone your staff, if you as a business owner have not clarified your values and are not clear. The other piece about it is the clearer you are on your values and the culture and how you want your business to look and feel, because it's about the spoken and unspoken behaviours and norms and things that happen in your business, how you do things around there. If you've got a clear values-based culture, if you've got a clear values-based set of behaviours, you're going to attract the right staff so much more easily, because that's the lens that you will be looking through when you're looking for your team members. And if you can get the right values alignment with those team members, and that comes down to the ad that you write, it comes down to the conversations that you have, it comes down to the questions that you ask, even in the recruitment process, which will very quickly weed out the people, if you ask the right questions and if you listen to the answers, that will greatly increase the chances of weeding out the people that aren't going to be a good fit for your organisation.
And even though the women who are listening to these podcasts typically don't have staff or they have a very small team, the concept of the importance of values is still there. It is still there to still embed it from the beginning. So if you're sitting down and designing your business now, or you're ready for the next iteration of it, to nick your word just for a moment, then checking in with yourself and putting yourself back to those values, those things that are important to you. I actually had a potential client today come back to me with an email and asking me, is it really possible to have a business that allows you to have a life as well? I'm like, yeah, it is. It is. You recognize those values right from the beginning. And I don't actually believe in balance, because to balance, you've got to stand still. I believe in blend. And yes, it is absolutely possible to blend it. So this conversation about understanding what's important to you and what you value is vital, no matter what stage or size business you're at. And I think as we're coming, full circle in this conversation, the other point that you brought up, which you were actually demonstrating by the way that you were explaining the way that you've built your business, is self-trust. Self-trust is something that we are aiming for, that we are growing into. As we get older and wiser, then we recognize that we can trust that intuition. We can trust our heart and our gut just as much as we can use our strategic brains. We can't ignore any part. That blends together as well. And I think self-trust is a skill that can be developed, but it certainly happens with time. And it sounds as though that is deeply embedded in the way in which you approach things as well.
It's really interesting, Ange. It's probably in the last couple of years that if there's been any lack of self-trust, that's crept in a little bit. The reason that has crept in for me is that I've been doing this job now for this business now for 12 years or so, 11, 12 years. And sometimes I feel that I've lost touch because I work mainly with small, medium businesses. And there's so much information out there now, and you can spend your whole life just reading and absorbing information. And you can get overwhelmed with it. So I am very intentional about what I read, I guess. Therefore, I have had a few concerns lately that I may be missing some of the latest, greatest, cutting-edge technology ways of doing things. The counter side of that is that the majority of my clients don't want that. They want what's going to work for them. So on one hand, part of my brain's going, oh, am I out of date? Am I keeping up with the latest and greatest? And then the other thing is, when I do have the latest and greatest, and I talk about it with my clients, 9 times out of 10 they go, oh, we're not interested in that stuff. That's too, that's sort of in the future or too far out of our current view. We just want to keep it simple. And so I have to keep reminding myself that what my clients need is what my clients need. It's not about me saying how smart I am or how much I know or how late and great I am with the information and the tools. It's actually about listening to my clients, talking to them about the options, and if there's some other option I need to look at or research, then go and do it then, rather than wasting time self-doubting. But self-doubt is human, and we've got to recognise that. Again, it comes back to the mindset. If we've got self-doubt, what do we do about that? and how do we move through that, and how do we manage that rather than ending up feeling like a victim, or beating ourselves up or feeling ashamed or concerned or whatever. Just pick yourself up, dust yourself off and go, yep, okay, I get that, that's where I am, but I need to focus on what my client needs, and if I focus on meeting what they need, all's good.
That sounds like very wise advice. Absolutely. If we stay connected, use those listening skills, and that's the concept of GOSCOP: get off self, get on purpose. That's my equivalent to the what was the one that we had before, the SNIOP.
SNIOP.
That one, absolutely. Well, Jo, what we've heard here, and I've really appreciated the conversation, is that winding story of where I started and where I moved to here, and then this was the next step, and there's like a flow. What I'm hearing in your story is that there's a flow to it, and there's a curiosity there, and a self-confidence and a self-belief that's allowed you to take those steps. But I want to make sure that anyone listening understands that these concepts of how we can work with our mindset, how we can learn to work with change, how we can learn to embrace the fact that we feel some doubt, but we keep moving forward anyhow. It's like, I think Elizabeth Gilbert had a wonderful quote about how fear is allowed to come along for the ride, but it's never allowed to take the wheel. It's never allowed to drive, but it can sit in the back seat, and that's fine. And so that reassurance that, even yourself, who identifies as someone that didn't feel a lot of doubt when you first moved into this entrepreneurial world, but that recognition that sometimes you can get a little overwhelmed, and sometimes you can think, am I missing out on some of the, the latest and greatest? So those wee fears can sort of trickle around the outsides of us. They're there. That's reality. But we can keep on taking action anyway. We can keep on moving forward anyway. And I think that's a really important thing to hear. So for someone that is thinking, okay, I'm on the cusp, this next chapter's calling me, how do I get over that hump and either change my business or start my business? What thoughts would you leave them with, Jo?
Excuse me. So there's a number of ways. I think it's really important I know and I've experienced how important it is. Two things. Have a really, and we touched on it earlier, have a really great network of people around you. And if you don't feel like you've got a great network of people around you now, reach out and find them. Now, as you know, and we've had these discussions over the years, which is one of the reasons that you set up the Diamond Mastermind for a while, a couple of years ago, and that was because there's a group of people who had been in business for a large number of years, but who were just at that stage of needing to reach out and just recalibrate and reconnect and be heard, and that self-doubt or that those questions be heard and have a space to do that. So it's really important to reach out and find that tribe. Find those people that are going to support you. And nobody can do it on their own, and I think that's the really important thing. And the other piece really is just to continue that self-belief. I love Desiderata. It's a piece of prose that my grandma had on the back of her toilet door. When I was a kid, I always used to love going to my grandma's place because I'd always run to the toilet. And people used to say to me, why do you always go to the toilet? I said, because my grandma's always got something really interesting on the back of the toilet door. Maybe it's a Kiwi thing. But she always had a snippet that she'd cut out of the paper or done. It was so fun. Anyway, she had this piece on for quite a while, and it was Desiderata. And one of the lines in it that I absolutely love and I use time and time again is, life is unfolding as it should. There are two states, state of faith or a state of fear. And I'm not necessarily talking about religious faith. I'm just talking about whatever faith is important to you. So for me, if I'm in a state of fear and talk about that mindset, it's okay, acknowledging it. As you say, put them in the back seat. Don't let them in the driver's seat. Acknowledge it. Make friends with it, whatever. But choose faith and keep on that path. And, if you make a mistake, who gives a stuff? I heard this phrase yesterday, which was pretty shocking. I won't tell you, but it was very good about moving on from ideas that don't work. I'll tell you offline. But it really is about recognising early if your idea is not going to work. Tweak it, change it, whatever. But, give it a good go. But then if you do make a mistake, it's okay. Don't panic. Just move on.
Absolutely. I think that's brilliant advice. It's the idea of not identifying yourself as a failure, but, things go wrong. My goodness, if I look back, and I've been in business since 2003, if I tallied up all the things that I tried that didn't work, and if I took those to heart, then I would have given up years ago.
We'd be a heap in the corner, wouldn't we?
Absolutely, a gibbering heap in the corner without a doubt. So, so important to hear that message. So important to hear that message, that it doesn't necessarily go right the first time, and that's okay. Well, Jo, thank you so much for sharing the journey, sharing the wisdom, sharing the tidbits there of ways that you have learned to embrace yourself, to embrace the way that you show up in the world, and to leverage that into a business that really works for you and works for your clients. I mean, that's what we're after, a business that serves us just as much as it serves our clients. I think that's incredibly important. So I know that we can find you at mindyourpeas.com.au. I also know it's having a revamp, so no, we are not judging. We are not judging.
Understanding, not judging, that's another thing that's important.
And there's also LinkedIn as well, was a great place to connect with you, yes?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, darling, and we'll be obviously staying connected, and I'll talk to you very soon.
I've really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you. I really appreciate being given the opportunity. Take care, everybody out there. Have faith.
Absolutely. And you, my lovely listener, thank you for taking the time to give us your energy and your ears as a part of this conversation as well. And I hope, as in with all of these interviews where we hear the stories, the meandering stories, that very seldom does someone wake up one day and have been struck by lightning, like, bang, this is what I'm here for. So often, if we look at the concept of purpose, if we come right back to the essence of it, it has always been there. It may express itself in different ways over the years, as Jo has explained to us, with all the different ways in which she was working. But nevertheless, it always came back to that central concept for her in terms of purpose, which is to help people develop their own strengths. So underneath, you have that central piece of purpose, something that is important to you, that you would get on your soapbox and talk about. You may have seen something in the world that you want to address and you want to fix. That is a clue. It is a sign. And it may mean that you start a new business. It may mean that you change the one that you have. It may mean you take a different job role. It plays out differently for all of us. But listening internally and stepping out, as Jo said, in faith, rather than in fear, because you've got that support around you, is all a part of stepping onto the path for your next chapter. So I hope that you too can have that feeling of trust, and you can make the moves that are calling to you. So let us know what's happening in your next chapter. We'd love to know what's unfolding. And until next time, this is Angela Raspas. Thank you so much, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening to the Your Next Chapter podcast. I really do appreciate your time. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn. And of course, my website, angelaraspas.com. If you enjoy the show, I'd love you to share it with another woman who's in the midst of business and life beyond 40. And if you love it, a review on iTunes or whatever app you listen in on would be fabulous. Reviews somehow impact that deeply mysterious algorithm and make it easier for the show to be found, which is always a good thing. So thanks again, and until next time, take care.